it's Drybear. We're crossing the 60-hour mark on Zenless Zone Zero, so it's a perfect time for me to review the game overall. Now, I'm going to be reviewing this as someone who plays a lot of games and has played gacha RPGs in the past. However, there's a lot of very unique aspects to ZZZ that subvert expectations, so I'm curious to hear from people that have played ZZZ as their very first gacha RPG in general, and curious to hear what your thoughts are, so drop those down below. Now, I'll be frank with you, when I first started playing Zenless Zone Zero, it's not really a game that I initially was attracted to. There was so much different about it, and some really awkward things that didn't feel right at first, but after giving it a bunch of time, it's really growing on me as an excellent title in the gacha RPG space. So let me look at this from HoYoverse's perspective. They had released several successful gacha RPGs, Honkai Impact III. They have Honky Space Train that I call Honkai Star Rail, and of course they have Genshin Impact. And they've had a lot of other game titles that they've been working on internally and things they've looked at. But if you're looking at it from a repertoire point of view on Zenless Zone Zero, I think it's actually a very unique and different style kind of game for them, and it honestly doesn't scratch the same itch that the Wuthering Waves or Genshin Impact or any of these 3D action gacha RPGs does for me, partially because the combat system is quite different than the others, but also because it's very instance-based and very direct, whereas it doesn't feel like you're exploring an open world or as focused on more of the world development as you are about the character development and the past stories that come with those characters as you're moving forward. So if I'm someone that's working at HoYoverse and we've already released 3 very successful titles, I think I would be looking to make a game that feels different, looks different, runs different than all the other titles we have, rather than just making, you know, Honkai 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, or Genshin Impact number 2, or even like a new turn-based game. I think there's a lot of really new things in here that are either to love or to hate in Zenless Zone Zero. And speak of love or hate, let's talk about the unique roguelite aspect that they have in the game, the TV system. This only exists on specific either exploration missions or the main story missions or some of the Hollow Zero missions, but there are very specific combat-only missions like combat or like the Shiyu defense. Those are focused more on combat, but there is a very big investment in this TV exploration system. And to be honest with you, there are things I don't like about it. One, I actually dislike strongly how hand-holdy it is. There are so many different points in this progression system where it pauses, grabs your camera, moves it over to exactly where you're supposed to go. It tells you the answer ahead of time, then moves you back to your camera point and it allows you to play from there. It just takes so long, and I wish it would speed up. You can press T on PC to amplify the move speed of it, but it's still going to have that kind of force-fed action to it. So I wish there was an option to just turn off all hints, turn off everything, and just let you explore the roguelike aspect to your heart's content to actually enjoy moving around to the spaces, getting the negative buffs, the debuffs, getting the corruption, letting it play out, and then going into the combat playing along with that. And if they keep investing in it, I think there's definitely some fun aspects to it. There are definitely times where I overused the amount of HP that my party had, or I ended up getting too many debuffs and it made it hard to clear a boss that was just a little bit above my level at the time. But I think there's a lot of people, myself included at the start, that didn't like or still don't like the TV system as part of the game because they miss being able to play a fully fleshed RPG where they're actually going around the world and solving puzzles in a traditional sense. So I hope they keep developing them. It's kind of bare bones right now and quite irritating if you don't get used to the mechanics and how you function with it. And I wish they also increased the difficulty on it too to make it just a little bit harder and a little bit more enjoyable. But I think there are some really cool positives to it, as you'd get in like a roguelike, you know, like having fun playing Risk of Rain 2 or Slay the Spire or something like that, where you get all the right combos of buffs and everything just goes absolutely crazy in damage output, or you have some crazy combinations that trigger very unique parts of the game. I think roguelites fit really well in gacha RPGs, and ZZZ is far from the first game to ever have that kind of roguelite system. They're just one of the first to do this very traditional tile-based system as part of the mainstay of the game. Combat was also something that I didn't like at first. There were a lot of really weird stopping points. And maybe you experienced this when you first started playing Zenless Zone Zero, but there were a lot of times where it felt like all I was doing was hitting left click or basic attack over and over and over. And this is definitely true at the beginning when you don't have a lot of builds going, a lot of energy regeneration and things like that, or you're not facing an enemy that actually has the opportunity to do quick assists more often, or more opportunities to dodge and trigger ultimates and things like that. It does get better over time, but there's still definitely those points where it feels like there's just too much lull where all you're doing is just spamming a single button. But when things work and you actually have a fully fleshed out team comp that has good synergies together, it does feel really fun and unique to other games where you're trying to combo those together. And there are plenty of times where I actually start thinking about how I want to sequence the transitions between my characters, right? So depending on the enemy you're facing when you trigger a chain attack, you could trigger a single chain attack where you go from one character to another. If it's an elite enemy, you can trigger 2 chain attacks. So you go from one character to another character and then back to that same character or to a third character. And in some boss fights, you can get up to 3 chain attacks as well, which means you can transfer to 4 characters total or back and forth the same characters. And depending on how your team comp is set up, you may want to pause on the support for a second, transfer that buff over to the impact character that does the stun daze, and then transfer back to the support, and then transfer that buff back to your main DPS to finish off while they're stunned and do bonus damage there. And there's enough like mechanics like being able to deal damage when they're stunned on the ground. You can see here in this clip that when I'm playing that I actually get a pretty good damage output out of this stun here. So you trigger the stun, then I'm going to transfer over to impact, then I'm going to transfer back over to my support so I can transfer my buff over to Soldier 11, and then I'm going to pop my ult and it's going to do ridiculous damage. So there's some really cool synergies and combos that you can put together to really create some fun interactions. And I think they did a great job on the polish and perspective of the game. The visual effects look good. The sound effects feel good as well. All of it plays really well together. They probably could have done more with the cutscene side of things. Some of the cutscenes are actually phenomenal in ZZZ compared to some of its competitors and also some of the games released by the same company. And then those specifically at the end of a chapter or at the end of a main story mission, some of those cutscenes are actually incredible. And Hoyo is kind of flexing with their animation department and their quality department for character creation and display. But also sometimes it feels like it's a little bit too much like you're seeing right here, just dialogue on screen back and forth between 2 characters. And you don't get as much as I think you would have wanted with other options, or maybe a fully fleshed cutscene. So there's definitely some 2D aspects that I think take away from the game, but I think that the other aspects that are there kind of make up for it in a way. And I guess my biggest takeaway for the game is that it feels like it definitely is a unique entry. There's not really many games that are exactly like Zenless Zone Zero, and that's probably what Hoyo was looking for. They wanted a game that felt like it was a new title entry into their list of games that wasn't just like one of their others, right? It's not another Genshin Impact. It's not another one of their titles where you could just go play the title that it's similar to. It fits in the same genre, and if you're someone who plays gacha RPGs, I think there's definitely some unique differences that are going to throw you off balance when you first start playing, but the more time you put into it, the more complicated the characters get, the more fleshed out the team comps get. I think the gameplay starts to really shine and the characters themselves really start coming together. And I'm hoping that we can start getting more meta shifts, like more investment in anomaly build-up characters, or possibly even getting disorder comps to work really well together. The stun system adds a nice element to the game as well, and the quick assist, I think, being a sequenced order rather than you being able to switch exactly to the character you want at any time, means that you really have to stop and think throughout the process and figure out how you're going to transition based on the circumstances that you're on. Whereas I feel like with a lot of gacha RPGs, especially traditional free swapping 3D action RPGs, you end up with the same sequence. There's an optimal order, an optimal sequence of events that you use to trigger the right effects in the right order every single time, and you don't really deviate from that. Whereas it feels like there's a lot more room for expression in ZZZ because you might not have a stun available, you might not have the right buff available at the right time. You also rely a lot on the enemy attacking in order to get you your quick swaps, or even get you your quick dodges on some characters. Like Nekomata has to quick dodge every 6 seconds, so depending on the enemy, you might have to switch up your strategy, or maybe spend more time on a different character rather than your main DPS in the same order, which I think can be quite frustrating at first, but can actually be quite rewarding over time as you start getting used to those dynamic aspects. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.